Hey,
Hey,
how are you?
hey, hey, Miss Bell, what's good? Tell us who you are, where you from, what's your purpose?
Um,
Talk to my
well,
community.
hi, I'm Elle. I'm from Tanzania, but I've been based in the US since like '07.
Okay,
And I know you from watching the show. Actually,
sure.
me and my boyfriend watch it, and we're always so intrigued by, just shows that kind of reveal what's happening in our society a little bit. And
Hmm.
I think, I'm just kind of narrowing back from what you had mentioned about how do you have authentic connections with people. And
Hmm.
if I can share, I
Please.
think authenticity maybe starts with yourself first. I
Mm.
know through my own self journey, I think I had to surrender to that fear and like let that go of, oh my gosh, am I going to find my person and stop looking, but actually sit with myself and like again ask yourself those honest questions, like who are
Hmm.
you, what do you want, is what you're wanting, are you willing to give that, are you able to meet the standard of your expectations and things of that nature. And
Hmm.
I think that begins, I think, finding your people, finding your tribe. I'm African, so we learn a lot about community, but I think that the reflection of a community is a reflection of self. So I think it begins first with yourself. And
Hmm.
sometimes having, real conversations with yourself require accountability. And I've
Hmm.
noticed, I think, a lot in these, like, you meet different personalities. And I don't know, with watching you, I may get some crap for this, but I didn't get what the issues were. I was like, oh, these are really good questions,
Sure.
Same as, may he rest in power, Kevin Samuels. He was
Hmm.
asking really important questions. And,
Hmm.
they were triggering because I think that if you aren't in that space to like really be honest with yourself, it's easy to
Hmm.
deflect, it's easy to get defensive. But I think naturally, we hear this often, we're all reflections of each other. And so I think it's like just holding that mirror and being honest with yourself. But I just wanted to share that. That's all.
Yeah, thank you so much. Everything you're saying is so right. And I want to ask you a couple questions,
Sure.
but before I do, I want to highlight what you said, and it's the importance of having a relationship with
Yeah.
self. Now, that is very important. And I was talking to my sister about this
Yeah.
earlier. And a lot of times when we do self-care or we talk about taking care of ourselves, a lot of it is, I don't want to say egoic or
Yeah.
narcissistic, but it is very self-centered,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I want to take myself away from the world, stop all the bullshit, move myself away from the negative comments and focus on myself. Well, what does that really
Yeah.
mean? And just talking with Marcus earlier, the meaning that I've gleaned, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'm not a very religious person at all, but I do believe in a higher power. I do believe that we are all connected. I do believe that there are powers outside of our understanding that do influence our experience.
Sure.
And with that said, and let me know what you think about this, the importance of having a relationship with something other than
Yeah.
yourself. I don't care what God you praise, what religion you are, what history you come from,
Ooh.
but it has to be more than
Yeah.
you.
Absolutely. I think it's difficult because we do live in the age of the internet where we're constantly holding these black mirrors. The ego, I don't think, has ever been bigger than what it is today, you know? And so everything
Mhm.
is about me, me, me. What can I get? What can I do? I need this. We're constantly holding these spaces. And I'm not exempt, I'm not perfect.
Right.
I
Sure.
think it's the human experience, but I am constantly having a conversation nowadays with my ego because I don't know that we could
Mhm.
ever be ego free.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
anytime I find myself going into spaces or I'm about to do, even with this, I'm like, okay, ego, if you're present, I want you to
Mhm.
know Elle is valuable, Elle is intelligent. I don't need you to speak up for me. Like, I don't need to jump out of myself to
Mhm.
experience this. And the world is
Mhm.
so much bigger than ourselves. And I think the more you learn how to discover that and learn that,
Mhm.
I think it does free from you. I think it does require certain things. I know you mentioned that you're not religious. I am Christian, I believe in God. And so I think there's certain things like even mentioned in the Quran or the Torah, different things where you're taught how to like detox, get away from yourself, go be with nature, go be still, go read a book, go self-discover. I think you start to kind of broaden that, perspective when it's so narrow,
Mm-hmm.
when it's just you're boxed in on yourself. I think it's difficult. But yeah, ego is huge. Ego is so huge and it's so present. And
It's so present.
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no, no. So I was just saying that I think it's just a matter of realizing that and understanding what your ego wants, because sometimes it's sparked out of trauma or different things. It's like connected in different ways, and I think the only way to actually know where it's stemming from is to sit with yourself, is to figure yourself out. And it's not easy to be to take time for yourself, to say, you know what, this is a season, I'm going to sit this one out, I'm not going to date, I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to take away, I'm going to stay off social media, those
Mm-hmm.
things. Solitude, I don't know if you've watched the show called Alone, or if any of you on here have, but it's a great show. It talks about different people. I think they're like these professional uh, for lack of a better word, like hikers who are they're taken to the wilderness, and they have no phones, they have nothing, and they're just kind of left to be in solitude and in nature. And solitude is who it's, I think that's where ego is more present, and it scares the
I,
crap out of you.
I want
Be-
to ask you. I want to ask you. So you just moved. You moved to the U.S. 7 years ago.
I moved to the US in '07. In '07.
Okay, so almost 20 years ago. When did you meet your boyfriend, before or after you moved to the
I
U.S.?
met my boyfriend after I moved to the US. So I actually have an interesting story.
Please.
Yeah, I was divorced prior. I mean, I've been divorced. I was married and then I was divorced. And so after divorce, I think that's when I had to hold that mirror to myself, because for a while I was a victim. Everyone had done me wrong, and people had done me wrong. I was this, and then it came to a point where I was like, okay, I'm 30, I'm going to be 35 this year, and I had to ask myself, just as someone who is raising a young human being, a young man, a young boy who will become a man eventually. I had to ask myself, like, okay, what is my part in my dysfunction? What is my part
Mm-hmm.
in the story? Where because it can't be just one person, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
moving forward, if I have space and I'm willing to try this thing again, to give love another shot, to attempt a healthy home and
Mm-hmm.
family life,
Mm-hmm.
what is the work that's required? And it was, at first, I think I wasn't able to do that because I think there's this fear when you're alone that you'll never find someone. So you're almost in a rush to meet someone. And my ego was very, very intact at that time. Like I'm online meeting different people and I'm presenting myself. And then I got tired. I got tired of it. And I was like, you know what? I started having real conversations with God. Like this is what I would like. I don't know if it's written for me to achieve these things, but this is what I would like. And if it
Mm-hmm.
is, I am willing to do whatever the work is in order to obtain this. And so I had spent a few months, like literally, I would go to the park and pray and write things down and cry and come into like hold myself accountable, certain things like that. And then I think it's funny because I met my now partner at the very moment I decided to be like, I'm letting this go. I'm not going to look. I'm not going to trip about this. If it's for me,
Yeah.
it's for me, but I'm not going out of my way anymore for this.
Isn't
And funny enough,
isn't that how it
you hear
happens
that
when you're not looking
often, but
for it?
I promise I'm
Sure.
living that testimony. Yes.
I am.
Once.
I'm so proud of you, because what you're I like, and all the women are who are in the live right now, like, listen up, because this is the release of entitlement. I feel like there's a lot of entitlement
Yes.
in the culture right now. How did you get to a point where you said, enough is enough, I need to focus on me?
Mm.
Because I feel like that is the quintessential piece when people miss after a breakup or if they're going through a tough
Yeah.
time. They're always looking outside, like, what's
Yeah.
going on, who's hurting me, what and like, what what piece of advice can you give to the community to say, this is what it's going to take for you to sit down and
Okay.
find the love in yourself? That way you can actually find love outside of
Okay.
yourself.
I will share this. I think I had gotten tired of doing the same thing. Like dysfunction comes in different ways and appears in certain ways, but
Mhm.
when you pay attention, if you've circled around enough times, you start to realize the patterns, right? And that's
Mm,
where you have to hold yourself accountable. I got to a point where I'm
mhm,
like, okay, well, I'm no longer in this relationship. I'm no longer friends with so and such and such. Yet still, these things are happening. So clearly, it's not outside, clearly
mhm,
it's within. And I think for me, I got to a point where I was completely done with the bullshit within myself, but I also didn't
mm,
know that there was bullshit within myself. And so I was like,
mm,
okay, so what is the bullshit? And then here you
mm,
learn the things that you learned as a child, the
mhm,
traumas, all these things that kind of weaved, this trauma filled child that's within many of us,
mhm,
that was acting up in different ways.
mhm,
And I think for me, I had to come to a point. I think the hardest and the most important thing that I learned was, oh, I didn't have self-love. And I hate saying that word today because I
mhm,
feel like it's so misused. It's very
mhm,
egotistic.
mhm,
Again, it goes back to like, oh, yeah, I want, what can be done for me, self. And it's not that. Like
mhm,
self-love is deeper than the surface stuff that we see in a lot of times today in society. But I
mhm,
was like, man, I lack self-awareness. I lack
mhm,
self-value. I lack self-respect. And then I'm expecting some magical human being to come into the picture and give me all these things that I can't even give myself.
mhm,
And it
mhm,
starts
mhm.
it starts at home. Home is you.
Yeah.
And if your home is not healthy, not perfect, because there's no thing as perfect, but
Mhm,
if your
mhm,
home is unhealthy and you're outside seeking healthy,
mhm,
you're kind of you're doing yourself and you're doing anybody else a disservice. They're always going to fail. You know what I mean? And you're going to be disappointed because you haven't taken the time to tend to yourself and
mhm,
tend to the things within. We're all human beings. We all have stories that have shifted us and made us who we are and molded us. And some
mhm,
things we never asked for. None of us have asked to be here,
mhm,
but
mhm,
we are here. So what does that mean? The
mhm.
story is bigger than us, clearly.
Clearly.
The story is bigger than us, clearly. So it's like, I think it's choosing to seek what your story is outside of yourself.
Mhm,
But what is your role in the bigger
mhm.
picture?
I love that you said that. One of the overarching things of this live, I feel like, is higher
Yeah.
purpose. And when you find a higher purpose, whether that's with someone else or by
Mm.
yourself, everything else becomes insignificant.
Yeah.
All the daily stresses, the bills, the future dates, the traveling, all of those things become insignificant when you have a higher purpose.
Right.
How, so you said you have a child,
I
right?
do. Yeah.
Talk about your child being a pillar in your life, because I talk to a lot of single moms and they always say that their child saved their life.
Yeah.
Can
Yeah.
you speak to
Yeah.
that?
I can. And then that needed mending too, because I think sometimes there's this thing with women, especially with their sons. We now make them be this men that you know what I mean, and that is so unfair to that
Mm-hmm,
child.
mm-hmm,
But I have a 7-year old, and I think, and I also grew up from divorced parents, so the fact that I noticed that the cycle was still going, and I'm like, okay, I have this other human being here, and I would like to break that cycle for him. So what does that mean?
mm-hmm,
And I think he saved my life in that way where I had to ask myself, well, what am I teaching? Because kids learn more from what they see than what you tell them, right? Children
100%.
are,
Say that
yeah,
again.
children are they are masters at understanding energy at its purest.
Mhm.
They pick things up really well. And so
Mhm.
I had to look around at that time, in my previous marriage, and it was not healthy, and and it was both our doing. It wasn't anyone's, not one particular person's fault, but and I was like, yeah, I can't, this can't be the example that I teach you, this can't be the thing that I teach you. And so with him, I think more than anything, we actually played a card game today. It's called Better Together. I have it here. I could bring it on screen if
Yeah,
anyone's interested.
yeah, I
But
love that.
I think the most important thing for me right now as a parent, and I know we're constantly shifting. As he grows, I grow too.
Oh,
um but is showing my kid that I am such a human being. I don't set a standard, like a standard of I'm this perfect person, and
mhm.
and I'm African, so like we're, our parents kind of hold the standard. We almost are like superior beings, and then you grow up and then you learn that they're humans, and you're like you are doing
I
this is how hypocritical, whatever. And
yeah.
I try not to do that with my child. I am a guide for him. I try to be a guide for him, but for the most part I try to show him that I am a human being. I don't have all the answers. Yes, we're
Mm,
assigned to each other, and I'm here to help guide you until you figure start to learn things out on your own. But for the most part,
mhm.
sometimes I don't know too. And actually, I'm not afraid to ask my kid questions too, like, oh, what do
I
you
love that.
think? Or things like
I
that,
love
and I respect him as
mm,
a
mm,
human being, as a young human being.
mhm,
And yeah, I'm committed to this thing. That's been my biggest commitment, has been parenting and
mhm,
prioritizing that. And that came even with now, like meeting people that you want to date. I'm like, what
mhm,
are you
mhm,
someone that I would want around my child? Is this,
mhm,
are you a good example? He has a great father, so it's not like we're looking for anything outside of that, but or
mhm,
more for
mhm,
that. But it's just the thought of like, okay, if this is a person your mom wants to show you
mhm,
as this is how a man treats a woman, like, is this a good example? And so those things were taken into consideration. And I will say I'm so happy I met a man who also is a father. His
mhm,
son is 5 years old, so our kids
mhm.
are 2 years apart. They're like brothers. They're like outside the door listening. They're so nosy. But um again, just, yeah, things like that I think have been really important in parenting. I don't know if I answered
I'm
that.
no,
I think a little bit.
I'm so grateful for you. And we only have a couple more minutes left, but before we leave, I want to thank you so much for doing the work,
Yeah,
for learning yourself, for being humble, for putting your ego aside and taking responsibility. That was one of the biggest things for
yeah,
me that really turned the tide, is when I started to take responsibility.
yeah,
How, one last message to all the single mothers out there who feel like them having a child is a liability, they don't see their value and their worth. What advice can you give to all the single mothers out there with a kid to make it easy for them to accomplish their goals and find love in the same way that you did?
yeah. I think if I could share anything is be proud of your parenting. Be proud of your parenthood. And if it's something you're not proud of, that's okay. Ask yourself what's happening,
Mm,
right? Like, why are you feeling the things you're feeling?
mhm,
Your child is not a liability. I could never see it as that. I think children are such a bonus, and they're important, and they're not for everyone. So that's really important. Don't ever try to press yourself into a situation just because, and
mhm,
then you find out this person really never wanted kids. You know what I mean? Be honest with yourself. Be honest with in your parenthood, and
mhm,
most importantly, take that into consideration when you're thinking of someone, like, hey,
mhm,
is this person safe for my child? Is this person a good example of a human being for my child? You know what I
mhm,
mean? it's
mhm,
it's about being selfless. It's not about
mhm,
just about you.
mhm,
It's a
mhm, mhm.
truly about being selfless.
And as a man, we love to see that. We
Okay.
love to see women being good mothers. I've dated women who have children, and
Yeah,
some of them may like, oh, I don't want you to meet my kids. I don't want them to be
oh,
involved. I don't care. And some women are, they celebrate their
yeah,
children. They celebrate their experience. They incorporate it because no matter what, the children will always come first in the lives of the
I mean, they
parents. It's
should.
they
They
should,
should.
right?
Yeah.
And so when I see a mother not taking care of her business and not putting the children first, that is a red
Yeah.
flag for me, because I know eventually that the child will come
You're
first. So
right.
what does that mean? That signals in my brain that you're trying to manipulate the situation to make me believe that it's something that it's not.
Right.
And so
Exactly.
the sooner that you show up in your authenticity, the sooner that you show up and recognize that, yo, your kids may not be a liability, but they are a
Yeah.
responsibility, the sooner that the men in their lives can take stock of where they want to go moving forward. And I think that's just the most important thing.
Indeed.
Hmm.
Indeed. I agree. I
Hmm.
agree.
El, thank you so much for sharing your
Ooh,
story.
yeah.
Like, thank you, like for real. You're doing the work, and I'm proud of you,
Thank
and I
you.
really do everything. I hope you get everything that you deserve.
Thank you, and all the best to you too. Bye.
We'll see
See
you
you
next
next
time.
time. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Oh, how do I leave?
My community, what it do? What it do?